My name is Andres. I was born and raised in a quiet coastal town in California, and for as long as I can remember, I've wanted to discover the world. Growing up, I spent countless nights poring over books about faraway lands, letting my mind wander beyond the waves. But I never expected that a spur-of-the-moment trip to Spain would change my life in such a profound way, or that I'd encounter a person who'd spark in me a flame of desire and confusion unlike anything I'd ever known. Last year, during a break between jobs, I decided to pack my bags and travel through southern Spain. I had read mesmerizing stories about Andalusia, the Moorish architecture, the passionate music, the swirl of cultures that coexists in every street. Among all the cities, Granada beckoned me the most. I craved the aromas of spice in the air, the echoes of flamenco chords resonating off ancient walls, and the tapestry of orange and blue when dusk fell behind the Alhambra Palace. I arrived in Granada one late summer afternoon. The sun was low but still warm on my face as I dragged my rolling suitcase across cobblestone streets. I'd booked a simple apartment near the city center, a little place on the second floor with a tiny balcony. My Spanish was serviceable, though definitely not fluent, so I mumbled short greetings to the neighbors. From the moment I set foot in that building, I felt the energy of the city fill my heart. It was a vibrant hum I couldn't quite put into words. After unpacking, I hurried out to explore before darkness claimed the sky. I made my way to a busy square called Plaza Nueva, where couples strolled arm in arm and street musicians performed, sending notes into the balmy air. My senses were assaulted by the smell of fresh paella from nearby restaurants, the laughter of passers-by, and the gold-tinged sunlight reflecting off centuries-old stone. That's when I spotted a small cafe with outside seating. I was exhausted and needed to rest my feet, so I grabbed a table, ordered a café con leche, and absorbed the scene around me. My eyes wandered along the terrace, looking at people chatting in melodic Spanish. That was when I noticed him. He was leaning against the café counter, speaking animatedly with the barista. He looked strikingly handsome, tall, a runner's lean physique, and a tanned complexion that hinted at a life spent under the sun. His black hair, cut in a messy yet purposeful style, framed his face. He wore fitted jeans and a loose gray t-shirt that clung to his torso in all the right ways. Something about his posture exuded confidence and energy, as if he were always one step away from leaping into adventure. Our eyes locked unexpectedly the moment he turned around with his coffee. Time seemed to slow. It was like gravity had shifted, and I was suddenly aware of every breath. The intensity of that single glance sent a ripple of excitement along my spine. We held each other's gaze a heartbeat too long before I instinctively looked down, pretending to check my phone. When I dared to look up again, he was walking away, disappearing into the throng of tourists and locals. My heart pounded in my chest. I told myself it was just a fleeting attraction, some random, handsome stranger I'd never see again. But destiny has a funny way of laughing at our assumptions. The unexpected reunion. A few hours later, nighttime had draped the city in a warm, sultry haze. I wandered aimlessly, discovering narrow, winding alleys lit by antique lanterns, my mind still replaying that intense stare from the café. At some point, I ended up at a Tablao Flamenco, a small venue for flamenco shows. The rhythmic guitar strumming and the passionate stomping of dancers lured me inside like a siren call. I found a seat on a wooden bench near the stage, surrounded by curious tourists and a few locals. The performance started, and the raw emotion in the singer's voice sent goosebumps over my arms. Halfway through the show, I caught a glimpse of movement at the back of the room. There he was again. The same man from the café, leaning against a wall, half illuminated by the stage lights, sipping a drink. He was scanning the audience as if searching for something. My heart pounded, hoping he wouldn't notice me. But then his eyes found mine. We both froze for a second. The corner of his mouth twitched in a faint, almost mischievous smile. He raised his glass in a silent toast. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment and glanced away, suddenly self-conscious. Who was this person? Why did I feel drawn to him like a magnet? For the next half hour, I tried to concentrate on the flamenco, but every chord of the guitar reminded me of that silent greeting. I could feel his gaze from across the room, as if it were a gentle hand on my back, nudging me to turn around. At the show's end, the crowd erupted in applause. People stood to leave, chat, or buy souvenirs. I lingered in my seat, hesitating. Should I approach him? Should I let the moment pass? I didn't have to decide. As soon as there was space, he wove through the departing audience and came toward me with a confident stride. Up close, I noticed flecks of gold in his warm brown eyes. My heart hammered. "Hey," he said softly in Spanish, then switched to English when he caught my accent. "You enjoyed the show?" His voice was mellow, slightly husky. I nodded, swallowing the dryness in my throat. "It was amazing," I managed. He broke into a grin. "My name is Mark. I'm from Madrid, but I've been in Granada for a few months now. I saw you earlier at the cafe. You looked like you'd just arrived." "Andres," I replied, offering a timid smile. "I'm visiting from California. I just got here today, actually." A playful sparkle lit his eyes. "Well, I might have some good suggestions if you want to explore the city. But it's late. Maybe we can talk outside." I agreed, my pulse quickening at the invitation. We drifted out onto the cobblestone street, dimly lit by overhead lamps that gave the night a dreamy glow. The hum of conversation faded behind us as the tableau closed. We were left nearly alone on a narrow lane that sloped downward. We strolled slowly, discussing the flamenco show, the intricacies of the singer's voice, the depth of the dancer's expression. I was astonished at how easily we slipped into conversation, as if we were old friends. Mark told me how he worked as a freelance travel photographer, capturing the essence of Spanish culture for magazines and online publications. "At first, I just wanted an excuse to leave Madrid," he explained with a small laugh. "Granada is full of color and history, it's been perfect for my photography. But there's another side of me that just feels at home here, in these twisting alleys, the random bursts of street music, the Moorish influence around every corner. Sometimes, you just know when a city calls you." I watched the way the streetlight outlined the curve of his cheekbones, the subtle flicker in his eyes. My chest felt tight, like I was on the edge of a precipice, anxious to know how the ground might shift beneath my feet. Mark slowed to a stop in front of an old fountain, water trickling softly into a stone basin. The quiet moment pressed on us. "Why did you really come here?" he asked, voice gentle. I swallowed. "I've been stuck, unsure about my next step in life. I wanted to do something spontaneous, see a place I've never seen, maybe find inspiration. I guess I just felt drawn to Spain." He nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe you found exactly what you needed to find." We locked eyes, and the electricity of the earlier glances roared back to life. My stomach fluttered. This time, we both let the silence speak for us. Eventually, he checked his watch and offered a wry smile. "It's very late. Do you know your way back to wherever you're staying?" I laughed awkwardly. "Sort of. Let me walk you, just to be safe." Without waiting for my response, he guided me through a series of winding streets. We chatted about silly things, favorite foods, odd travel mishaps, how I used to pick up seashells back in California. By the time we reached the apartment door, I felt a surge of regret that the walk was over. "Well, thank you," I said, fumbling in my pocket for the key. The lamplight above the door flickered, revealing fleeting shadows across his face. "Thank you," he replied, stepping slightly closer. "I'd like to see you again. Soon." His tone was low, with a slight hesitation that spoke volumes. My breath caught. My mind whirled with longing, fear, excitement. I gave a short nod. "I'd really like that." He beamed, the kind of grin that made me feel warm from the inside out. "Tomorrow? I can show you the Alhambra at sunrise. There's a vantage point most tourists don't know." Butterflies erupted in my stomach. That sounds incredible. We stood there, the silence thick with anticipation. For a second, I wondered if he might lean in, bridging the inches between us. My heart hammered in my chest. But after a gentle pause, he just lifted my hand to his lips and gave it a soft, old-fashioned kiss that left me breathless. With a shy laugh, he said, "See you at 5 in the morning, if you're brave enough to wake up that early." Then he disappeared into the moonlit street, leaving me tingling with excitement. A dawn of possibility. The next day, I stumbled out of bed at 4:30, running on adrenaline. Every fiber of my body buzzed with the anticipation of seeing Mark again. By 5 a.m., I was out on the dark street, waiting near a small plaza. Sure enough, there he was, wearing casual clothes and a light jacket, camera bag slung over one shoulder. He greeted me with a playful grin, offered me a takeaway coffee, and guided me up a steep hill leading toward the Alhambra's walls. The city slept beneath us, the occasional dog barking in the distance, street lamps casting feeble glows on ancient cobblestones. My thighs burned from the climb, but Mark's excitement was contagious. He pointed out historical tidbits along the way, from the Moorish arches to hidden pathways. The atmosphere felt both sacred and exhilarating. Eventually, we reached a small terrace overlooking the majestic palace complex. The sky was a palette of purples and blues, the first hints of sunrise stretching on the horizon. We sat on a low stone wall, breathless. Mark took out his camera and started adjusting settings, occasionally snapping test shots. I admired the shape of his silhouette as he worked, wanting to memorize every angle of this moment. Soon, the sun's first rays kissed the palace towers, igniting them in a soft golden glow. Mark pressed the shutter repeatedly, capturing the ephemeral magic of dawn on these ancient stones. He turned to me with a dreamy look. "No matter how many times I see this, it never gets old. Sometimes I think Granada was built to remind people that beauty comes from layers of history, battles, heartbreak, triumphs, all combined over centuries." I didn't know if he was talking about the city or something deeper. Words failed me, so I rested my hand lightly on his. He laced his fingers through mine, neither of us saying a word. There was a sweet intimacy in the hush. We stayed like that for a while, watching the city awaken, the sky brightening from indigo to light blue, the Alhambra bathed in soft light. Eventually, the city started stirring, and the spell of the silent dawn gave way to the everyday bustle of locals and early-rising tourists. Mark stood up, slinging his camera bag across his shoulder and helping me to my feet. "How about breakfast?" he asked, the corners of his lips curling into a teasing smile. "I know a place that makes the best churros con chocolate." "Lead the way," I replied, feeling a grin tug at my own lips. We strolled down the hill, the warm morning glow embracing us. There was an unspoken acknowledgement between us, something was happening here, a connection forging in the hidden corners of an ancient city. But neither of us rushed to define it. Instead, we reveled in the quiet thrill of discovery. Moments of bliss, hints of conflict. Over the following days, Mark became my informal tour guide, and more. We explored twisting alleys in the Albaicin neighborhood, sampling tapas in tucked-away bars, leaning close to share stories about our families, our dreams, our insecurities. He'd snap photos of me laughing over a plate of patatas bravas, or pausing in wonder in front of a centuries-old doorway. Our easy closeness grew quickly. The tension, that spark, was always present, fueling every look and gentle touch. But I could sense a guarded side to Mark. He sometimes avoided mentioning what exactly brought him to Granada, beyond photography. There was a flicker of sadness in his gaze whenever I asked about his past relationships. I wondered if he carried heartbreak in his suitcase, or if some other conflict weighed on him. Yet I didn't press too hard. I, too, had parts of my life I wasn't eager to share, including the fact that my trip was on a finite schedule. Eventually, I would have to return to California. One afternoon, after wandering through a bustling marketplace, we found ourselves near my apartment. I invited him inside for a glass of water and maybe to rest from the scorching sun. The place was modest, a small living area, a tiny kitchenette, and a balcony that overlooked a narrow street with laundry hanging from windows. I poured us water while he flipped through some notebooks on my table, noticing the scribbled notes I'd made about the places I visited. Mark teased me about my messy handwriting, then flashed that heart-melting grin. I nudged him playfully. Next thing I knew, we were close, too close, his eyes locked on mine, breath intermingling. I swallowed, heart hammering. With a gentle tilt of his head, Mark leaned forward, and our lips brushed in a soft, hesitant kiss. It was sweet at first, an almost timid taste of something we'd both been craving. Then the dam broke, we kissed more deeply, months, maybe years, of longing unleashed in a single moment. My hands found their way around his waist, his fingers threaded through my hair. The tension that had been hovering between us finally ignited in a rush of heat and emotion. When we pulled apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to mine, eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you at the cafe," he admitted in a hoarse whisper. I laughed in a burst of relief and joy. "You have no idea how many times I've thought about it." We ended up on the balcony, leaning against the railing, arms wrapped around each other, watching the day slip into evening. It felt unreal, like a dream I worried I might wake from at any second. But this was no dream. The warmth of his body was tangible proof, and the shy contentment in his smile showed me he felt it too. Shadows of reality. As days turned into a couple of weeks, our connection grew deeper. We ventured beyond Granada to nearby villages, or took long drives through olive groves to photograph hidden gems. At night, we'd share dinner, sometimes accompanied by local friends he had made. I started picking up more Spanish phrases, especially the ones he whispered in my ear, mi vida, mi amor, terms of endearment that melted my heart. But a sense of urgency nagged at the edges of our happiness. My return ticket date was creeping closer. Meanwhile, Mark seemed distracted whenever I mentioned my flight. Sometimes, I caught him brooding quietly, camera forgotten in his lap, as if grappling with a problem he couldn't name. One evening, after a particularly lovely day visiting the Sacramento Caves, I found him on my balcony, staring at the street below. He looked pensive, shoulders tense. I slipped behind him, wrapping my arms around his middle. "Hey," I murmured. "You all right?" He let out a shaky breath. "I haven't told you everything." My heart tightened. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to. But I'm here if you want to share." He turned, taking my hands in his. "I came to Granada not just to take photos. I was running away, from an ex, from a life in Madrid that stopped making sense. I got burned in my last relationship, and the thought of committing again scares me." His eyes softened with remorse. "But with you, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Something real. And it terrifies me." We sank onto my small couch. I let him speak. He told me about his ex-partner, a complicated relationship that ended in betrayal, leaving Mark mistrustful and emotionally raw. Listening, I felt a wave of tenderness for his vulnerability. Gently, I brushed my thumb over his knuckles. I understand. I've also been hurt before, I confided. I guess it's what makes this so special, because deep down, we're both risking our hearts. For a moment, we clung to each other in silence. I could almost hear the rhythm of our pulses in sync. The sense of a ticking clock weighed on my chest, reminding me I had only a little time left in Spain. Should I ask him to come with me to California? Would that be too crazy, too soon? My head swirled with questions. But I kept them inside, not wanting to pressure him. The inescapable deadline. My final week in Granada arrived. Mark and I danced around the issue of my departure, hoping to keep the illusion that time was infinite. But time, inevitably, marched on. We tried to squeeze in every possible adventure, sunrises, dinners, quiet afternoons in hidden plazas. Yet each tender kiss carried the weight of a looming goodbye. One night, 2 days before my flight, we found ourselves at the same flamenco venue where we'd first truly noticed each other. The music was more intense than ever, echoing our emotional turmoil. After the show, we lingered out on the same narrow lane, the same fountain trickling in the distance. I hate that you're leaving, he admitted, voice tight. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I do too. This feels real. More real than anything I've had in years. But my job starts soon, and I can't just. He nodded, his gaze distant. I know. I know you have a life outside of here. And I'm not sure I'm ready to leave Spain. Part of me wonders if I should follow you, but I have a photography project lined up in Seville next month. The choice felt impossible. We embraced, as if trying to fuse our bodies so no distance could separate us. The faint flicker of a street lamp illuminated his face, revealing tears trembling at the corners of his eyes. I pressed my lips to his cheek, tasting the salt of his sorrow. How about we don't say goodbye, he whispered. Instead, we say, see you soon. We can figure out a plan. Long-distance calls, visits. I can come to California for a while when I'm ready to travel overseas. Or you can come back to Spain. My tears spilled over, but I managed to nod. Yes, see you soon, I echoed, clinging to the hope that this wouldn't be our final chapter. The last sunset, for now. On my final day, we hopped in a rented car and drove out to the countryside, searching for a vantage point to watch the sunset. We parked on a hillside, where rolling olive groves stretched to the horizon, gilded by the sinking sun. We spread a blanket on the dry grass, the world bathed in shades of orange, pink, and lavender. The hush of nature pressed around us. I lay with my head on Mark's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Occasionally, he'd lift his camera to capture the fading light. We spoke in hushed voices, reflecting on how bizarre and wonderful it was that two strangers from opposite sides of the ocean could find each other like this. He told me about childhood summers spent with his grandparents, running barefoot through orchards, chasing stray cats with a homemade fishing rod. I told him about the Californian beaches, the hours I spent daydreaming about traveling the world. With every story, our hearts intertwined. When the sun dipped below the horizon, he held me tighter, as though to memorize my shape against his body. A distant bell tolled from a church in a nearby village. The day was ending, and so was our stolen slice of paradise. As the light faded, we shared one last, lingering kiss. It was a promise, that we would not let an ocean between us extinguish the fire that had ignited in our souls. Epilogue, a promise to return. The next morning, Mark offered to drive me to the small bus station that would take me to the airport in Malaga. The ride was quiet. We clasped hands in the back seat, each lost in thoughts of what would come next. At the station, we stood near the bus door, the engines rumbling, announcing our imminent separation. I could barely speak past the knot in my throat. He brushed a thumb across my cheek. "I'll text you every day," he murmured. "And when we're both ready, we'll figure out how to be in the same place." I nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I'll hold you to that." One final kiss, a mixture of heartbreak and hope. Then, I climbed onto the bus, found a seat by the window, and gazed outside at him. He looked small on the platform, hands stuffed in his pockets, trying to maintain a brave smile. As the bus pulled away, I raised a trembling hand. He waved back, and then he was gone, swallowed by the city that had brought us together. I spent the journey fighting back emotions, replaying every moment, every laugh, every gentle touch. Unsure if or when we'd see each other again, I tried to cling to one comforting truth: something powerful had begun in Granada. Even if we had to wait weeks, months, or years to bridge the distance, I believed that flame would keep burning. Back home in California, I returned to my regular life, a new job, the familiar beaches, the friends who welcomed me back with curious questions. Yet nothing felt entirely the same. Messages from Mark started rolling in daily, photos from his shoots, silly selfies, short voice notes in Spanish teaching me new phrases. Each one lit a spark in my chest, reminding me of the nights we walked side by side along those narrow alleys, sharing secrets in hushed tones. We still don't have a definite date for our reunion, but every time I see a sunrise streaking the sky in pink and gold, I remember that morning in Granada, the hush of the city and the warmth of his hand. I remember the look in his eyes that told me everything I needed to know: love can bloom in the unlikeliest of places, bridging cultures, miles, and hearts. All we need is the courage to let it in. So, if you're listening to this and wondering if you should follow your instinct to travel, to meet new people, or to risk your heart again, my advice is simple: take the leap. You never know what city, what moment, or what stranger might lead you to an unexpected, life-changing love. And that, my friends, is the story of how a single glance in a cafe turned my world upside down. If you'd like a part 2, an update about what happens when I finally meet Mark again, let me know in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it moved you. Who knows? Maybe your next adventure awaits just around the corner.